Hey everybody, welcome to View from the Top podcast, where we help growth-minded men who desire momentum in their family, their business, and their finances get through the valleys and up the mountain to their very own view from the top. I am so glad that you're listening in today. Before we get Big A in the studio, I just want to tell you a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. So if you guys have ever played Battleship, so you've got these ships and you're moving them around. And you're trying to put the pins, these coordinates, and then blow things up. Well, we're going to talk about what marriage trust destroyers look like today on the View from the Top podcast. So we want to find those pins. We put them in the right spot so we don't blow up our marriages with those destroyers. So let's get him in the studio here. The host with the most, Big A. Welcome.
I don't know how to take that, host with the most. Robin said I need to lose 25 pounds. I guess that's what you're referring to today, Wally, the host.
I wasn't saying that at all.
I get to listen behind the curtain. I get all amped up when you start talking about what we're going to talk about. And this game, I've never played this game, so you'll have to introduce me to
You never played Battleship?
No. I was working, man. My whole life, Wally, I've been working. I didn't have time to play it.
You missed out. My brother, you missed out.
I know. Yeah, I probably would have liked it too, because I like to shoot guns and I like to blow stuff up. How you been? You doing well?
I'm doing great. Hey, I wanted to drop a line in here. I forget which podcast episode it was, but it was definitely a few months ago, where one of the riff topics that we talked about was should I approach someone that I'm acquaintances with that I don't have like a really deep friendship with some things that God laid on my heart?
I remember that.
You remember that?
I do.
Well, I did it.
Uh-oh. Okay, good. You're giving an update. I like this.
Scared.
I haven't even
really
heard.
Scared. Wasn't really scared, but he won't mind me saying his name. His name is Mark. And again, I'd known him for quite a while. We'd done coffees together, but there was always this thing about him that I walked away just feeling like, man, I feel like he's missing the mark, and never felt quite the liberty to share. Was on my mind, and so we had that conversation. And then a couple weeks after that, I went and made some time on the phone with him and had a conversation. And I asked him for permission to share some things that were on my heart. He granted it, and we walked through that. And man, it was just a sweet time of, him admitting, if I'm really honest with myself, that's exactly what's going on. After that, he texted me a couple days later and he's like, hey, send me a synopsis of what you said so I can share that with my wife.
Oh, wow. He's taking it to the next level.
Yeah, it was so good.
Wally, just think if you hadn't have done that.
I know, right?
He could have gone the remainder of his career and had this blind spot, and you've revealed it to him. I like the way you did it too. You do something I don't do, and I need to get better at it. You ask his permission. I'm like, dude, sit down. I got something I got to tell you.
That works most of the time.
Yeah, but you're so polite. You're like, I would never think to ask that. You've even actually helped me with my adult children doing that, because I'll go, hey, this is what you need to do with those grandkids, and instead of, you're like, hey, I've got a suggestion, and would you consider this if I offered it? I like that. It shows a lot more professionalism than the way I do it. So proud of you, man. I'm glad that you did that. That's going to help Mark out a lot.
Yeah, I appreciate the encouragement, and I just wanted to show myself trustworthy. Talking about trust today, and to our listeners, that I did follow through. So,
hey, speaking of that, when you talk about trustworthy and we've talked about these kind of things. And the reason we do this is to help people to heighten their awareness to areas in their life that may not be intentional, but these things happen and it could be misconstrued. It's like things that we say, things that we do. And I was in a meeting recently, and there was an employee going to be hired. And this person that was over this department started giving all the great qualities of this person. And I was in the room. And there was about 8 of us in the room. We were making the decision to hire this person, but he was going to be her direct report. And he starts telling all of the capabilities and what their zone of genius was and their competency levels. And I mean, this person sounded amazing. And I knew who it was that they were going to hire. And then he stopped, he paused, and he said, okay, anybody got any questions? And everybody just sat there. Nobody else knew this person. And he said, okay, let's vote. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. is this all you got to say? And he looked at me and he goes, yeah. And me and this guy can clash sometimes anyway, because, I'm pretty forward with this guy.
Sure.
And I said, there's another team member here at this organization that knows this person well. And why don't you share what they said? Because I already knew they had a conversation about it. Well, Wally, you could have lit a cigarette off his forehead. I mean, he lit up like a Christmas tree. And then he started sharing these other things, very high level. And I started diving a little deeper, saying, well, wait, that's not exactly the way I heard that. And we started unpacking it. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we didn't hire that person. Now, here's the question. Is not telling all the facts a lie? That's the question for today. And so everybody in the room wasn't privy to all the information. They were only privy to what he had shared. So how would you take that? If you were on this committee, you were going to hire this person and they didn't share everything. Is that the same as a lie?
So I have to admit that there have been times in my life where I've been that person wanting to do something and not willing to tell all the facts. There's been times in my younger self, the past, that I've done that. I think it comes back to motivation. If I'm honest with myself about why am I not willing to say some things that would help others, especially if there's other people part of that decision process, right? In that specific case you're talking about, I'm not sharing everything that I could share to help everyone together make a good collective decision. And so I would say that I probably had a selfish motivation. And if I have a selfish motivation, then it's probably not what I should be doing. I mean, honestly, right? Is it a lie itself? Man, I don't know. I think there's times with our children that we reveal appropriate facts over time. A lot of times, I remember when Sonia and I were, raising our daughters, that we would build on situations over time where we would maybe reveal more things. A lot of times as examples or experiences we had as kids or decisions we made as young adults. We weren't going to share that with them when they were 10, but we may share a portion of that story. So I think it could be appropriate, but on the other side of that, I mean, depending on the situation, I think it definitely could be a lie. What do you think?
Yeah. I was pretty adamant until you went through that explanation, and now I'm not as adamant about the way I feel. I was going to say emphatically, I think it's a lie if we don't share all the information. Now, in the context you just gave it with your children, age appropriate, they don't need to know everything, I wouldn't say that's a lie. But if you're in a meeting like I was in, and you're going to hire somebody, and just the good is shared, not the bad, he was very motivated to hire this person, and for me, that was a lie.
Yeah, 100%.
Because he had the other side. It wasn't like he didn't know. If you don't know, it's one thing. Which really gets us into today's episode talking about marriage trust destroyers. We had an anonymous community member reach out. And just so you know, we do pay attention. We do read the emails. We have Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind members that send us questions. And this anonymous request came in and said, hey, Big A, would you talk about marriage trust destroyers? And I would credit that person, but they were anonymous. And so that tells me that they've got some maybe some marriage trust situations that they're working through today. But Wally, when I was really kind of getting my head around this topic and started thinking through a little bit about trust, man, it really hit me hard when I started thinking about some of the people in my life that I was grateful for, people that I trust implicitly. And there are others that I trust. I want to go on record with saying you and I have a really good relationship, and I trust you implicitly. I hope you do me.
Same. Yeah.
So I think that goes without saying. But at the top of my list was Robin. You know, we're soon to celebrate 44 years of marriage. I know you and Sonia have 30 years of marriage, which is really cool. That's a lot of marriage. 75 years of marriage between us. It's a lot of marriage. But then I started thinking about some of my buddies, and I want to say this with all sense of humility. I know a lot of people, right? I have a lot of acquaintances. And over the course of my business career and being in this community this long, I know a lot of people. But I really was honest with myself, right? I sat down and I said, man, I'm just going to list, and I'm not going to list them all, but I'm going to call out a few of the names. Underneath Robin, you know, what's funny, we talked about this not too terribly long ago. We were talking about, she was asking me some very pointed questions, and I was asking her some very direct questions also, which we do pretty regularly. But I can honestly sit here and say, we dated for 2 years. We've been married for 44 years. And to the best of her memory and to the best of my memory, she's never lied to me. Not one time.
Wow.
And we really talked at length through that. And she's like, no. And Robin, I think it's to a fault almost. It was like,
you're like,
Robin,
sometimes I wish she had.
Yeah, right. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, we've got a great relationship in regards to that. But the next person was Bob Warren, my spiritual mentor. Bob's from Hardin, Kentucky. Played ball for Vanderbilt, went on to play in the ABA pro basketball. 20 years, I got to hang out with Bob, and he was my mentor. We lost him 8 years ago. But then just a few other guys, Alan Lindsay. Alan's one of my best friends, have been for 45 years. And then Chris Freeman, Hugh Morris, Bob Willis. These are some guys that I've probably known Bob Willis the longest, probably over about 50 plus years. And when I started thinking about these guys in relationship to trust, I can't think of one time they've ever lied to me, that they've ever misled me intentionally. There's nothing that these guys don't know about me. Everything. I mean, I have no secrets with these guys of any kind. And the reason that I trust these guys is because, first of all, they're predictable. Like, I know I can count on them. I would say dependable over and above everyone else I know. These guys are, at a moment's notice, I could call them. And I've got a great amount of faith in these guys. And the reason I can say I have faith in them is because I don't have to see it for myself to believe it. Like right now, you know, if somebody said, hey, you need to drop whatever you're doing and go do this. Tell a quick story. I went to Alan's house several years ago when Holly was little. Alan had borrowed my pressure washer, and it was in his garage. And I just didn't tell him I was coming. I just drove up to his garage. And when I opened the door, it was locked. I tried to open the door and it was locked. And I called Alan and I said, hey, where's the key to your house? And he told me, and I got it and I opened it and I said, oh, what's the alarm code? And he told me the alarm code. And I said, all right, thanks. And I hung up. Went in and got the pressure washer. I didn't think anything about it. Went in and got the pressure washer, put it in the truck, and I got in the truck, and Holly's jaw dropped. And she looked at me and she said, Dad. I said, what? She goes, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. I said, what are you talking about? She said, you called Mr. Allen. He gave you the key to the house. He gave you the alarm code, and you never told him what you were there for. And I didn't think about it till after it was over. And I said, he trusts me that much. And that's the reason that you build these long-term relationships with these guys. The other thing is I feel safe around them. Now, I don't mean physically safe. I can take any of them out. That's not what I'm talking about. No, not really. Most of these guys could break me in half. But I don't have to pretend. Like, I can be me. I can be Big A, right, with all the facades down, everything. And I guess the main point for me in the trust is I can be vulnerable. I can be authentic. I can cry. I can be sorrowful. You know, I can tell them I need something. You know, I feel weak, and they help me. Man, that is so what we desire for our marriages, isn't it? I mean, when you think about that, don't we want that for our marriages? I mean, the marriage should be that go-to place. So I'm going to pause for a second, Wally. Kind of tell me just for a second a couple of those friendships or how you see your marriage as it relates to trust, and any deep thought you've done around trust as it relates primarily to your marriage, but even with others.
Yeah, we'll get into it. Some examples as we go through this. I think it's interesting. You know, you talked about me married almost 44 years. We're working on 31. And I feel like and I've mentioned this a little bit on the podcast before, and I get my years mixed up or my time frame mixed up, but it's only
That's
been
because you're getting old.
Yeah, it's only been the
why.
recent years. I'll just say recent years, and that's probably 3 to 5 years.
Right.
Really an emphasis probably in the last 18 months where Sonia and I have been more vulnerable and more transparent with each other than we have ever been. And well, I could talk more a little bit later about like why we've been able to do that. But one of the things that has stood out for both of us is that one of the reasons that we've been unwilling to trust each other has been that we're fearful and we're afraid of what the other person's going to think of us. And that with our friendships, it could be the same way, right? We don't want to say what we're really thinking. And I'm not talking about, being unkind or something like that. I'm talking about like there's real deep emotional thoughts that go on inside of us in life, and especially in a marriage where, I mean, you are the most vulnerable and the most intimate that you can get with somebody. There is nothing. Sure. I mean, I think that's why God says that we become one, so that there is no difference. And we've really been working at that. But one of the factors that characteristics that God really impressed upon us this last 6 months, really, probably, we've been using it. We've been saying it to each other, and it's proving out to be very helpful. And that is that being willing to give grace to each other, actually using those words. And so we're on this journey. I mean, we don't have it all figured out yet. Right. I have a few friends, probably not as many as you because I'm more introverted, but I definitely have a few friends that I trust implicitly. And, you being one of them, and there's a few other ones as well that, matter of fact, I hate the fact that we said we're going to be transparent on this call, on these podcasts sometimes, but I had a rough week. I had a rough couple of days. It was just emotional, mental. Enemy was at work in my mind. And last week, Thursday, actually, we went to a podcast PodFest event in downtown Nashville. You and I did last
Chris
Thursday.
Kremitzos. Let's give him a shout out. Yeah. Chris Kremitzos, PodFest. He's a great guy.
Podfest.com. So any of you podcasters out there, it's a pretty cool event. Good dudes and good people. And it was a really cool event, helpful, good to spend some FaceTime. But on our way down there, like you and I didn't ride together. We normally those situations, like we would ride together, but we had stuff going on afterwards. So we rode separately, and I get in the truck and I start driving down there, and I had a moment where I'm like, man, I gotta call. I right now, like in this moment, like I'm about mentally to go off the deep end. Like I gotta call one of my guys that I trust. And so I started to call one guy. He didn't answer. I called the other guy, and he didn't pick up. And then he called me right back like 30 seconds later. And I was able to have that moment where he was able to kind of talk me off the ledge and just encourage me. And that was it. And we just went on because we trusted each other. And Sonia and I are learning that after 30 years. We're learning how to trust. And I'm excited about what we're going to continue talking about today. I love what you said about why do we trust each other? That idea of predictability, dependability, having faith, and feeling safe around them, and that you're okay with being vulnerable.
Doesn't it feel good to have some people in your life that you can do that with? Like, what do people do? And maybe a listener, maybe listeners out there right now, are you like, Big A, I don't have any of those people. Like, I don't have people that are dependable in my life. I don't have people that I feel safe around. I see it all the time, Wally, that these men are in isolation, that they need input, they need resources, they need encouragement, they need a place that they can go like you did, like you had a moment. Like, what if you didn't have anybody? Like you just balled up. And see, the problem is we're in our own head. Yeah. And then it gets worse. And all we can default to is the outcome's going to be terrible. Where your buddies can go, all right, Wally, listen, you've been through this before, or this is what you need to do. Here's who you need to talk to. Hey, call me anytime. You know what he did
when he called me back. He called me back. You know what he did? Yeah. And you have to understand personalities, right? This is the importance of having multiple friends. Is that he called me? He picked up the phone. I'm like feeling like the world's ending, and he's like happy and having a great day and been crushing the day and he could have easily like stooped and brought it down to my level, and he didn't.
And make it worse.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, man, I mean, he didn't pacify me, and he listened and whatnot, but yeah, that was, it's so true.
Well, that's what's so cool with the guys that are in Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind.
Mm-hmm.
It's a brotherhood. It's a community. And these guys have dozens of guys, the 10 that they meet with every week. And then they go across the aisle to the other groups and they can talk. And, you just build. Matter of fact, some of the strongest relationships in Iron Sharpens Iron are guys that are not even in the same group.
That's who I called. That's who ended up calling me back.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, Stephen did.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? And so these guys, you build, something in your relationship clicks with them, and you see things, you have similar core values and similar likes. And man, listen to me, it is so important that you guys have people in your life that are dependable, that are predictable, that you have confidence in, you have faith in. Whatever they say, you're like, man, this guy would never lead me astray. And then you can have that sense of vulnerability. You can just let your guard down and be who you are. And that's what I learned 25 years ago being in a mastermind group when I first started. It's radically changed my life. Well, I wanted to say that trust in a marriage, though, it's foundational. It's got to be present to support every other aspect of our marriage. And when you start thinking about every aspect of our marriage, you've got obviously intimacy, but you've got emotional intimacy. And that's where I think a lot of guys, including myself, have missed it oftentimes, right? Robin wants to sit there and go really deep into conversation. And sometimes it feels icky. It's like, oh my gosh, get this off of me, but they want to go deep emotionally. They want a sense of security. And then there's a mutual dependence that you have with your spouse. And so trust is really what allows your partner to feel comfortable and secure without any fear of judgment or betrayal. And that's what we're building in marriages. And listen, some of you are listening to this and you're like, man, we're as far from that as you can possibly get. I had a phone call with a guy this morning, and he is 180 degrees from this completely. I had another guy call me last night and said, Big A, you've been kind of walking through this with me, and I'm going to share something with my wife tonight that I've never shared. I could use your prayers, and hopefully I have the courage to go through with this. And he's a young guy, young family. And he did. Very difficult conversation. He had to share some things with his wife. And about 2 hours later, he texted me back. He goes, Big A, it went amazing. He said, I'm so excited about what this is going to do. See, he's been carrying that around for years.
Yeah. Oof.
And it was that intimacy, right? It's that emotional intimacy because he trusted his wife. And he was able to go. You know what he did? He just solidified that trust 10x. Because he went to her. He didn't get caught. He went to her and said, hey, I got something we need to discuss. Let's talk about some things that destroy that trust, though. And the big one always is infidelity. 100%, that'll destroy your trust every time, every single way it can. It's the first thing that comes up when we talk about destroying trust is infidelity. I know, Wally, you've talked about this. I've talked about this on previous episodes. Anything more you want to elaborate on as it relates to infidelity? Maybe some guys, I do before you talk.
Yeah.
There's guys right now, and I talk to men all day long, every day, so I have a lot of conversations. I have a lot of things to reference. But another guy I talked to yesterday, he said, man, I'm really torn. I'm supposed to go out of town with a buddy of mine, and I just found out he's having an affair. And he said he's had an affair before, and his wife forgave him. They rebuilt their marriage, and here he is again. He said, I don't know if I should go on this trip with him. He said, we're supposed to go on this trip. We're going to be gone for a week or 10 days. And he said, I'm looking at it almost as an opportunity to talk to him. But on the other hand, I'm pissed at him. He said, this guy's destroying his marriage, and he knows he's doing it, and he's caught in this trap. I want to tell you guys that are listening out there right now, if this is happening to you, you feel maybe it's full blown, maybe it's just emotional, maybe it's just somebody's got your attention. I want you to go tomorrow and get somebody you trust, and I want you to confide in them. I want you to tell them. It doesn't have to be your spouse necessarily, but you need to air this out because it's going to destroy your family. It's going to destroy you as an individual, And I want you to go because when we shed light in the darkness, the enemy flees.
Yeah. Secrets
And I
make
want
us
to tell
sick,
you,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, they do. And you think about that little guy that called me last night. He's been carrying this burden for years.
Yeah.
And today he feels like an anvil's been taken off his chest, right? He's a new man today. So, man, you want to destroy your marriage, you get caught cheating, infidelity, even an emotional affair. And I'm telling you, man, you're going to spend the next 5 years building back your spouse's self-esteem, trying to regain that trust, rebuild that trust. So, yeah, man, that's tops on the list.
Something you just said that I think is important. You said, probably not go to your wife even if you don't go to your wife right away. I would encourage you, guys, if you've got something deep-seated that you've been holding on for a while, or you're in the midst of a decision that you've made that you're carrying with you right now, I'd actually encourage you to maybe not go to your wife first, but to get those guys around you. If you don't have those guys, find some. If you can't find some, get a counselor, get some professional help there to know how to walk through that. You want to understand your wife best. You want this to be something that helps. There's going to be some wounds and some hurt, and you want to be able to walk through that well with her. Yeah. And whatnot. So I'd encourage you there. But man,
you got a chance. Here's the thing, Wally. We'll stay on this for a second.
Yeah.
You got a chance when you are proactive. When you're reactive, it's 10 times as difficult.
Yeah.
And so when you're proactive and you can get counsel, you can get help. Right now you're afraid. You're like, man, my wife finds this out, we're done.
Yeah.
Well, she's going to find out. 100%. She's going to find out. It's just when is she going to find out? And if you really love your wife, you really love your kids, you really want your life to head in an upward trajectory, man, let's identify this thing. Go get somebody tomorrow, talk through it, get a counselor, get some professional help, and figure out how to attack this thing.
Yeah, and
good word.
Infidelity is not just, when you consider to be, you talk about emotional affairs, not just a physical, adulterous relationship that you've had. I think that infidelity in those ways that can actually destroy. So we're talking about trust destroyers. You didn't really specifically mention even pornography now. I think you alluded to that, but I just saw an article the other day, and this scares the crap out of me. I saw an article the other day on AI, and I've been kind of curious and wondering, like, they talk about the dangers of AI, and I'm a kind of a technical guy, but I haven't paid super a lot of attention to it just because I've got better things in life to do and pay attention to and focus on. But I've been paying attention a little bit more because obviously it's not going away. And there was an article on some apps that are out there now that are starting to come out. And essentially what they are is virtual prostitutes, virtual girlfriends, that you can create your own avatar, hair color, eyes, all that stuff. You can decide on characteristics, and then you tell all about yourself. And then essentially it's a one-sided relationship with someone that's not even real.
Wow.
And that scares. I think of men today. I think of guys that are struggling in their marriage, the emotional intimacy, the physical intimacy isn't there right now, struggling through that. I think of younger guys that are married with young children in the house. We just sat in a mastermind call a couple weeks ago with there can be some intimacy challenges when you got a young mom that's raising 2 or 3 kids at home and working through that and feeling the stress of that and the challenge of that. And I think of these young guys that are 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, 20 years old, that 25, that are single and not dating and not getting married because they feel like they're getting their needs met from pornography and these types of applications. And so I say that because there's so many angles around this that you want your wife to not trust you. It could be that. It could be, she knows that you drive a certain way to work so that you can see a certain runner running down the road. Or, I mean, I'm telling you, man, like, I've heard it all, right? I've thought a lot of it myself. I'm going to be honest, right? I've had some of those thoughts go through my head. And our wives are smart. And those things affect our relationships, and they affect the trust for sure. Another one is finances, right? A marriage destroyer can be finances and how we handle our finances. in our home. I remember I was married the first year I was married, and I just had this idea one day that I was going to go trade our car in while she was working and buy a truck. And I showed up to pick her up after work. It turned out
That's
well.
the first time I've heard this.
I know.
I'm not sure what got into you that day.
I was young and stupid, but yeah. So that's a large example, exaggerated example, but just how we manage our finances and decisions that we make and how we treat our spouse around finances. If you've got a wife that doesn't work outside the home, but withholding from her financially, not being willing to even discuss some of those things and whatnot. Like, yeah, finances can mess you up. You can make some poor decisions when it comes to finances that destroy trust.
Well, you know what I've learned being in Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind now for 10 years is that there's not a right or wrong way. The right way is what works for you as a couple. And that's what you've got to sit down and really work through and be honest and open in your dialogue in regards to the finances. I know, Wally, we even had a episode 6 months ago. We talked about that. You and Sonia handle yours way different than Robin and I. And there's neither one are right or wrong. It's just what works for us. But the point is hiding things never works, right? Regardless of how your finances work. And I've always handled it for Robin and I, but I don't hide anything from her.
Yeah.
She's got access to anything she wants. I'll tell her anything she wants. There's just certain things she doesn't care anything about knowing. And so I'll take care of it. And you do things differently. You're a spreadsheet guy and you sit down, everything's very visible and open. And that's great for you and Sonia. That works great. The point is no one's hiding anything. We're talking about trust destroyers. You're going to do it pretty quick with finances if you're not careful. The other thing is neglect. And this is something when we were putting the show together, I started thinking about some areas in my life and in my marriage where at times I've neglected Robin. Just like, hey, I got this, I'm going to take care of this. And I just neglected some of the things that I should have done. Neglecting your partner's needs, their desires, and even their presence. I think not knowing or ignoring is not a valid excuse. It's like, well, I didn't know, or, it's like, well, you should know.
Pay attention. This is your wife.
We should sit down and ask questions,
this is your
right?
Wife. You should find out. This is like a big part of your job as a husband is to figure out your wife.
Right. And to figure it out. So guys, don't be neglecting your wife. Straight up lies, or even lies by omission. We talked about that kind of early in the episode about not giving all the truths, half truth. My mom used to say that. She said, half truth is just as much a lie as an entire lie. It's like, you got to give all the information. I think that's what my mom was even alluding to. It's like, I can't say if I don't have everything that I need.
I think,
but here's the thing.
Real quick, when you talk about straight up lies or I think about deceit too. I've seen this a couple of times. I saw it on a video the other day, like a YouTube short or something. And then I've seen this in person, be in a social setting. And I've had this thought even with my own wife is like, I know it sounds like a crazy thing, but we're talking about being deceitful and not wanting to show things. And can you give your phone to your wife carte blanche and be like, go to town and look through my phone?
100%. I can.
Yeah, I can too.
She can take that and go through.
I can too. But if you can't, if you know in your heart that your wife's going to find something on there, like that, there's an issue, man, and you gotta address that.
I had a family member that would never set his phone down ever. His wife had no permission, didn't know the password, could never go near it, pick it up.
That builds trust. That's a trust builder right there.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's
They're
terrible.
not married anymore.
Oh, there you go.
But anyway.
There you go.
Here's the thing that we think as guys, sometimes there's little innocent secrets. I hear this from guys all the time. Well, there's things that, well, she doesn't need to know that. That's in my past and it's not important, or there's some health issue maybe that you're dealing with. And I find this more in older guys.
It's not until she finds out that it's a trust destroyer.
Then it's a problem.
Yeah.
Right. and then just creating doubts, and then fears. And I know sometimes it's hard for a guy to say, I'm afraid of something. And I'll be honest with you, it's some of the most intimate moments for Robin and I emotionally is when I sit down with her and share there's a fear I have or there's a doubt I have because she's not used to that. She's not used to me being doubtful because I'm a very positive person. I'm very forward. I'm very sure of myself. But when I do share that, I notice an immediate connection.
So she doesn't like think you're a wimp or tear you down or like
not at all.
It's the opposite of
Just
what you think. Yeah, I love the enemy in that, right? The enemy is the one that's like, don't tell.
He's a pansy. Don't tell. He's a pansy. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, but something that we're confronted with now more than ever before is digital infidelity.
Yeah.
And not with just another person too. A lot of the stuff that I'm reading and seeing is, the amount of time you're spending in front of a screen, taking the place of your spouse.
Attention, even if it's not,
it's their attention,
even if it's not like porn or it's just.
No, I'm just, your attention.
Yeah, your attention
is there.
Yeah.
I'm guilty. Like, of course, everyone that follows me knows I love to hunt and fish. And so I love to watch some of these deer clips, these big bucks, and I bow hunt all the time. And so I love to watch those.
You just shot a nice buck 2 days ago.
I did. Yeah, he's a good one.
Yeah.
I was in the tree 5 minutes. On our property, we live back in the woods. And I said, Robin, I'm going to go back here, muzzle load, black powder. And, 5-6 minutes, I was back at the house. She goes, what'd you forget? I said, I forget nothing. I killed a deer. I come back to get my stuff, and I got to go down and get the deer. But listen, I can get guilty of watching too many of those on the reels, right, or stories. I can watch those, and I start feeling it because I can feel Robin's eyes looking at me when I'm on the couch. I'm like, I need to put this down. So, yeah, just be mindful of that. The other thing is broken confidence. Sharing with others things that your wife has shared with you, that Robin's really big on this one. She's like, this is for us, right? And there's certain things, and she'll emphasize that. She'll be like, not your buddies, not your accountability group, not your best friends. Like, I want to talk to you about something, and this is for us. And if you want to lose her trust, you let her find out I go tell one of my buddies something that she's confided in me. Right? It's like, that's for us. That's us. Nobody else, just for us. And man, you know what'll happen? She'll start reserving things that she shares. She won't share.
Blow it,
if I blow it and go tell, right, then there's no more trust there. One that I really saw, and this happened in a family member of mine, is when her husband didn't stand up and defend his wife to his family. And she really lost a lot of respect for her husband. And I don't mean just physical, like, sure, any guy would protect his wife out in public or something physical, but you get involved in a family skirmish thing,
or a church
skirmish. Okay,
yeah,
you do that, and you're gonna lose her trust. It's because it's like, hey, you didn't have the courage to stand up and defend me as your, like, I'm not even saying I'm right, but like, can we talk about it, get on the same page? Like, I need you to defend me. I need you to stand in the gap for me. And well, my parents did a lot of wrong things, but my parents did a lot of good things too. And one that they did do a good job on, when we got married, my mom told me, she said, Robin is now the number one person in your life, not me, not as your mom. And I'll never offer my advice until you come and ask. And she said, you go work out all your problems and trials with her. She's yours. And so my mom, I think my mom loves Robin more than me. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, she's like her daughter. And I think it's because of that. I think it's because she so respects her. So what happens, Wally? What happens right now? People listen to this. They're like, man, my spouse doesn't trust me at all. I mean, there is absolutely nothing at all. I think the first thing that we've got to do is we got to do some self-reflection.
We got to start with ourselves. Yeah, I agree with you.
Isn't that hard, though?
Yeah.
You know what? We want to lie to ourselves. I'm not that bad. And then we start rewarding ourselves. We start saying, well, I work hard and I do all these things. And I was coaching a guy not long ago, and he said, when I get home, I expect supper to be on the table and all my socks in the drawer. And I'm like, dude, I can tell you hadn't been married but a minute. You know what I'm saying? You got to start thinking through yourself. You got to really identify what the source of the distrust is. And so I think that self-reflection.
Hey, Big A, when you're talking about the self-reflection part, I don't know if we specifically mentioned this, but we're talking a lot about ways that maybe we've caused distrust with our wives.
Sure.
And this is, it's a guy's podcast, right? We're helping growth-minded men, right? That's what it's working to do. But there could be cases, and there are cases, I'm sure guys listening and go, hey, I hear what you're saying, but my wife, as I'm self-reflecting, it's really my wife that, maybe has some trust destroyers that she's set out on the battlefield, right? That need to be addressed too. So I think it's just important. I think these things we're going to talk.
Yeah, they don't get a free pass.
Yeah,
right. Women don't get a free pass.
Right. So I just want the guys out there listening. If that's you, continue listening, because we're going to talk about some things that I think will be helpful.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought that up. The other thing is communication. And it's a place that I don't do well when I'm tired. And I've noticed that in my life. Robin, I get in from working and, she's doing whatever and she wants to sit there and talk. But Robin has learned over the years that she's got to give me probably an hour when I get off to take off my work hat and put on my husband hat. And communication. It's just a good time really for us to sit there and talk. And the thing that I've also found out, and some of you guys are going to be like, Big A, I'm never listening to you again. You've lost your mind. But let me just hear me out for a second. I bring up tough situations between me and Robin when we're not arguing. And I've learned this over the years because I want to win, right? When I'm in the heat of the battle, I'm going to pull out whatever knife I got, whatever tool I've got. I want to win. But when I've calmed down and I'm not mad, it's much easier for me to go to Robin and go, hey, I got this thing and I'm probably seeing it wrong, or maybe I'm seeing it right, and maybe you can give me more clarity. And can you unpack this for me and just help me understand? Man, we can sit there and talk and have a discussion just like you and I are talking right now. But when she's pissed and I'm pissed and we're in there fighting, it's like, man, we're not going to get anything productive done. So think about your spouse. Think about how you can initiate a conversation to where you can sit down and logically talk through. I'm not going to holler and scream and slam doors and throw stuff. Like that doesn't solve anything. And I want to encourage you to do that.
Can I throw a couple things in there too? Choosing a good time to talk. You mentioned when you're both calm, but also the timing of that. I've caught myself in the past wanting to start a deep conversation 10 minutes before we're supposed to walk out the door. And that is it. I feel the urgency for some reason. We talked about being honest earlier and open, but I do think you can say too much at one time. I think there's ways to layer in the conversation and get a little bit of clarity, a little bit at a time versus, especially if it's a real deep issue. Idea of not going with accusations or hostility. A lot of times we want to say you. Yeah. And that's not going to be helpful. Well. We don't, the other person, whether that's your wife saying that or you saying that's hard to perceive. Right. And then you mentioned it earlier, but just giving full attention, listening carefully, not having distractions around you. And I think the goal in communication, as we talk about these trust destroyers and starting to, combat them, is that our goal first conversation out isn't necessarily like that it's going to be fixed and that, everything's good from that point on. I think it's rather about making progress. And if we go in with a mindset of, hey, I'm going to make some progress in my communication with my wife on these things versus like, we're going to get this fixed right now. I think you're setting yourself up for some hurdles that you may not be able to jump. So
go slow. We got time, and don't do what Wally does. Don't do it 10 minutes before you go to dinner.
Do that. It's not helpful.
Do that. Listen, guys, get you a plan of action. Yep. Really think through how you can establish the transparency that we're talking about today. Have somebody that you trust that you can really vet out what you want to say. You can go to them. There's no judgment. Some people that have experience. We see these guys in ISI frequently now that they'll bounce things off of their trusted advisors in their group before they go home and do these things. You really want to have those boundaries, and you want to set expectations around the problem, right? Don't go in there just haphazardly. Go in there with somewhat of a plan, and then communicate often, like we said earlier. And then if you need to, it's nothing embarrassing about getting a professional to help you. Floyd Dawson here in Hendersonville's helped put my marriage back together decades ago, and periodically I still go. And so there's not one thing wrong with doing that. Wally, anything final before we kind of end up? I know that a lot of these guys are hearing us. They're going to go home. They're going to make some good decisions on how to be preventative, how to repair something. Maybe you've already broken. Just go have that honest communication. Talk with your spouse. Do it every day too. Don't just do it once a month. It's like, oh, okay, I'm supposed to do this today. That's not going to serve you well either. Get people around you that you trust 100%. Be vulnerable with them. Tell them what you're trying to accomplish. And I guess at the end of the day, what I'd like to leave you with is that trust is really the foundation upon which the house of marriage stands, without a question. If you're facing these trust issues today, know that it's not always the end of the story, and it's not, I promise you, it can be the beginning of a new chapter. I want you guys to go out there and rock it in your marriage. Don't have these trust busters. Don't do these things, because Wally and I both want you to have that view from the top.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to this episode today on Trust Destroyers. And as Big A said, let's get to work, man. Our marriages matter, and we definitely don't want those trust destroyers, to be wrecking our marriages. So get to work. But while you're doing that, you can also join the conversation we're having. Big A talked about getting some good board of directors, counselors, people around, some guys around you that can really help, support, and encourage you. And one way you can do that, if you don't have that already, simply get started, is to get out to viewfromthetop.com/group. And that'll take you right to our private Facebook group page just for you podcast listeners. So we hope to see you there. Join us, join the conversation. We have some questions, have some bonus content we put out on there. So we would love to see you there. And until next time, have an awesome week.